Today on the Best Life podcast, we have Allan Heinberg. He is a scriptwriter. He's worked in television, in film. He's highly accomplished. He's known for his work on Wonder Woman, which was a feature film. He's also worked on The Sandman. That's one of the things he's really proud of. He's done Grey's Anatomy, The O.C., Sex and the City, and the list goes on. If you Google Allan, the list is as long as my arm. He's a really generous, lovely human being that believes in goodness and believes in friendship. And I'm really excited today to go through and just dig into his mind. He's got a fascinating mind, and I'm excited for what's coming. So welcome, Allan Heinberg. Allan Heinberg, welcome to Best Life podcast. Allan, where did it all start? Take us back to the beginning.
It started for me very early. This journey probably started at 6 years old for me. As a 6-year-old, I was a big music fan, and it was the 70s. And my favorite group were the Carpenters. And I, as a 6-year-old, at the time living in Rochester, Minnesota, was imitating Karen Carpenter's singing voice, apparently scarily well. And so they would put me on stage, and I would sing Carpenter songs. And people would go insane because there's a 6-year-old singing like Karen Carpenter, who had one of the best and one of the saddest voices in pop music. So when you've got a 6-year-old on stage singing, I'll Never Love Again, it caused a stir. So I started performing at 6.
And was that exciting feeling, being there with everyone going, wow, because Karen Carpenter, massive success at the time, and you were able to do her. So was that for you like, oh, I like this?
I guess it must have. I so loved her and what she was doing, and the fact that I was able to do what she was doing was very exciting. I'm sure the applause was amazing, but it was always about what other songs can I learn? What other music can I learn? I started acting a couple years later at age 10. I had seen Carol Reed's movie version of the musical Oliver and seen kids my age on screen singing and dancing. And I thought, okay, that's what I want to do. And I just decided at 10, that's what I was going to do.
So you wanted to, so you started off, you were very much, and were you thinking singing, acting?
Performing. It was singing and acting. And the more I sort of learned what movie making was and then learned what Broadway was, it became, one day I want to write as well. And I did some writing in school, but it wasn't until I got to college where I was writing. I was taking it seriously. So creative writing in any form of like dramatic writing, playwriting, that started at university.
Okay, so you knew that the whole let's call it showbiz for a broader description. You knew that was for you, and then why did the writing come in? Why did you because obviously now you're this uber successful writer, but your catalog is. It's huge.
I've been
it's big.
Around for a
Don't
while.
Be modest. Don't be modest. It's huge.
I've been around for a while and I've been lucky. So yeah.
Lucky.
Yeah.
I don't believe in luck.
Well.
So they say that
we'll get into it.
An expression I heard was luck is preparation meeting opportunity.
That's my experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is my experience.
And and I know one of the things about you, and we will come back to that later, is your prolific work rate.
I just like it. I know when I'm not working, I don't feel like myself.
Right.
So I would rather be working. I don't take vacations. I don't know what to do on them.
You don't take vacations?
No, I just don't. I'm at a loss. I don't know how to do that. This podcast will be my break today from my life for the time that we're here.
So you started off, obviously, stage actor. You love that, really clear about that. Knowing so clearly what you wanted to do. Now, no one knows what they want to do normally in their 20s, often in their 30s, sometimes in their 40s. People are still trying to find their career. You knew early doors what you wanted to do. And then eventually, obviously, it rolled into writing. Did that change things in school with you knowing what you wanted to do?
So I started acting. I did a production of Oliver at the University of Tulsa when I was 10. I was a kid, the role of Oliver is a young boy.
Yeah.
So everybody else apart from the other orphans in the show, they were adults and college students, and it was part of the university. And the woman who directed it was the head of the theater department at University of Tulsa. And she was a tried and true, like Broadway veteran, student of the theater. She was a powerhouse performer and director. And so I got a crash course in what that world is. Sondheim's Sweeney Todd came out that same year, and she gave me the Sweeney Todd album to listen to, and it changed everything for me. Like, I knew the score of Sweeney Todd before I knew My Fair Lady or Oklahoma. I become very, I guess the word is obsessed. Like, if I fall in love with something Stephen Sondheim writes, then I have to know everything Stephen Sondheim has ever written, and I go down the rabbit hole. And that became true about Sondheim, and then all of Sondheim's influences. So by the time I was 12, I had learned a lot about the musical theater and about theater in general. And it just sharpened my sense of, I remember asking my parents for a subscription to the Sunday New York Times because of the arts and leisure section. And that was my...
At 12?
Probably at 10,
Yeah,
probably
10.
when I started Oliver. And that sort of defined everything, like the entire direction of my life was guided by the New York Times arts and leisure section, everything that's on Broadway and all the movies that were happening and all the television reviews. And that was my map to the future. And there weren't a lot of other 10, 11, 12-year-olds in Tulsa in the 70s who felt that way. I felt in Tulsa as though I were being held back from Broadway because I was so assured of my gifts in smart quotes. But there were a lot of theater programs and a couple for people my age. So I was participating we have a number of theater companies in Tulsa, and I was working with them, but there was a Teens for Theater Tulsa program. There were other teen groups that were doing this sort of thing. And so there were probably a dozen of us my age who were devoted to it. I feel like we all had professional aspirations, but I never had a moment's doubt that that was going to be my future. And so even picking a university, I was lucky enough to get accepted to Yale. And I had an amazing teacher who's still a tremendous influence to me in high school. His name is Dr. Jerry Talley. And he was a fan of the arts, and he taught humanities at my high school. And he told me, I apologize to anyone who is a theater major at undergrad, but he said, by no means should you major in theater studies at university. University is for all the other things you need to know and learn about, and you can do theater on the side. You can do it extracurricularly.
Was that advice based on it's a hard gig to make it in theater? So almost
it was not a good use of my parents' money.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like graduating Yale with a theater studies major does not prepare you for the theater necessarily, and it doesn't prepare you for the workforce or for, but I decided to be an English major, and I doubled as a film studies major. And the irony was that it did set me up because I ended up becoming a professional screenwriter.
At that point, you were thinking of the stage.
I was thinking about Broadway, and I was still acting. I would do, even though I was at university full-time, I would do 3 shows a semester. And then in the summers, I would go to Williamstown Theater Festival and act there. And one summer I went to New York and, did a lot of auditioning, really.
Can you dance as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
you have to be a triple threat.
Yeah.
You have to.
Yeah, you got to have it all, right?
Yeah.
You got it. So whatever role comes up, you can do it.
That was the discipline at 10. It was like, you go to ballet, you go to tap, you go to jazz class, you have your leg warmers, you show up, and you try to get the job.
So all the words to Food, Glorious Food, I presume.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Tell me how the writing sort of crept in. How you focused on the acting on the Broadway and the being on the stage.
Well, a lot of it is because of my fandom. I was reading a lot of plays and a lot of musicals because I was in Tulsa, so we didn't get to see everything. But if something was happening in New York, like Christopher Durang was sort of taking off Broadway at the time at the Public Theater.
Tell me about Christopher Durang.
Christopher Durang wrote a play called Beyond Therapy. So I haven't talked about this. This is a buried childhood memory. There was this book club that one could join called the Fireside Theater. And they would do hardcover editions of the latest plays and musicals that were on Broadway and off Broadway, and they would mail them to you in Tulsa, Oklahoma, or wherever you were. So I would read about Chris Durang's Beyond Therapy or any number of his huge successes, and they would appeal to me, and then I would wait a month or three, and the Fireside Theater would send me the script. That was my experience of what New York was getting to go and see, every weekend. So I became a huge fan of a lot of these authors, and I think in my mind someday I was like, I would love to be able to write a play like this. I would love to be able to, and what ends up happening in one's career as an actor is that you are at the mercy of other people's gifts. Like somebody has to write something that producers love enough to want to produce and that a director loves enough to want to direct. And then you have to be lucky enough to be the thing they're looking for. Whereas if I want to write something, it's a completely different experience. It sort of starts with the writer. And for my personality type, that definitely was the way to go.
What is your personality type?
I don't know that I would describe myself as controlling overall. Maybe I'm sure there are many people in my life who might describe me that way. But I like to be the agent of my own experience. It's my life. It's my experience. I want to direct it and drive it and move myself forward. But I am very possessive of my own time and that's always been true. Even going on family vacations, I stopped doing that at age 10 because I wanted to control my time. And if I was in a show or if I had schoolwork to do and my parents decided they wanted to go skiing, I let them take my brothers and I stayed. I mean, nothing's changed. I'm exactly
who would look after you if you were 10 years old?
I was very lucky in that my mom grew up in Guatemala and Honduras because of her dad's job. And she was raised by a woman who then came over and raised us with my parents. So we had full-time childcare, and she was the most extraordinary woman and shaped my life enormously. But she and I would stay home while everybody else went on vacation, and we were very happy to do so. Also, when you're an actor, you have ideas about the text, you have ideas about the staging, and ideally you're going to work with a director and a writer who want your ideas and who collaborate with you and you build something, but you're not always that lucky. My creative instincts and impulses were not satisfied by just being on the actor side.
Because you also did some comic writing. You were obviously obsessed with DC. I think you were started with DC comics, not Marvel, right?
I was a DC person as a kid.
Yes, as a kid. And then you did some writing. When was that? Was that first?
The comics?
Yeah, was that the first thing you... Or?
Well, comics, I was a huge comics fan as a kid until I was about 13, 14.
Right.
And then I rediscovered them in my early 20s because I had a friend who was older than I was who was reading comics. I couldn't understand why he was reading comics. And he said, oh, during the time you took off from comics, they became adult. And a huge wave of mostly British writers had sort of come into comics and made them extremely sophisticated storytelling giants. So by senior year, I was taking the writing really seriously. And when I moved to New York, I was very lucky and I got a job in an off-Broadway musical called Hannah 1939. At the same time, while I was acting off-Broadway and on Broadway in New York, I was writing plays. And my community, the people that I had known at Yale Drama School and Yale undergrad, we had all moved to New York together. So I was writing for us to create projects for us, for my friend Chris to direct and my friend Alicia to star in. And, it was a very sort of communal. And then was doing the acting professionally and then working at Bankers Trust.
What was Bankers Trust? What was that?
Bankers Trust is now Deutsche Bank.
Right.
But they had this extraordinary presentation group where you had to make pitch books for all the bankers. And I had a permanent temp job. And you could basically make your own hours and come and go, depending on when you booked a job or not. So the whole time I was in New York, I was in and out of Bankers Trust, and it saved me.
And then what was the sort of bit where suddenly, oh, I've got a career here? What was that moment with the writing?
I had a director friend who really liked the short plays I was writing, and I think he directed one of them. and asked me to do a longer piece. And that piece, I think he submitted it to Manhattan Class Company, and it sat there for a while. And then they decided that they wanted to stage it, to my astonishment. And they found a great director, Amelia Ben-Susan, who became one of my most favorite colleagues of all time. And she worked with me on it. Ray had submitted that play to Manhattan Class Company. Months went by. I was then in a Broadway show, a Neil Simon show called Laughter on the 23rd Floor, which Jerry Zaks directed. And it was while I was in Laughter that MCC called and said, we want to do your play. So I had this unbelievable experience of rehearsing with Tim Blake Nelson and Ellen Parker playing the two roles during the day with them. And then at night, I would go and do my Broadway gig. And I was 24 at the time. And I just thought, this is the best thing I've ever experienced in my life.
And then did you push Bankers Trust aside at that point? Or
Well, I went down to only Sundays. Because
Right.
even when you're on Broadway, I was making Broadway minimum, which is
Right.
not enough. So, I had friends who, when they were on Broadway, we would still do Sundays because the money was too good to pass up.
I think that's a key point, the fact that you just kept the work going on a Sunday until you were time then to just really take
Oh,
off.
I couldn't afford not to.
Yeah, you had
know?
to.
But it was, you get to Broadway, after all those years of reading the arts and leisure section, I was finally on Broadway and I couldn't afford to pay my rent.
Mad, isn't it?
So I had to keep my shifts at the bank. And it became like, I don't know if I can afford to take this job.
Right.
Because the bank is paying me $50 an hour.
Yeah.
So yeah, but yes, I was very lucky. And that group of people at the bank, it was all artists. We were working together, but we were also making art together. It was a very lucky break for me, and a very sustaining community of people and artists. And I'm still in touch with them today.
And then what was the big breakout moment where suddenly
Well, it was
we can leave the Sunday gig?
It was interesting because I started in that Broadway show as an understudy, and then when Stephen Mailer left to go and do a movie, I took his role, and I wasn't enjoying it as much as I was enjoying writing the play and going to the rehearsals and rewriting the play and all of that stuff. And I must have been complaining to my best friend about it. And her name is Jen Thompson. And she had been one of the first replacement orphans in the original production of Annie. And she said to me at that point, listen to me, if it's not enough for you to show up at a Broadway theater every night and sign your initials on the call sheet, if that's not enough for you, you need to get out of the way and make room for somebody else. And I just thought, oh, she's right. I'm just taking up space here. Like this is somebody's dream, and I'm already, restless and like
Dissatisfied.
unfulfilled because
Yeah.
I think she was absolutely right. And it was a good perspective. The cast of that show was unbelievable. It was Nathan Lane, John Slattery,
Nathan Lane.
Neil Simon, Jerry Zaks, legends. Like there's no place to go higher in terms of success at that scale. And I was bored and restless and frustrated.
And okay, so then you're thinking, all right.
I'm at a crossroads.
Yeah.
And I called my agents and I said, I think I'm going to write full time. And in New York in those days, the auditions were in person. It's a whole day thing, auditioning for something. And I thought I'd much rather be writing than going on auditions every day. So I basically said, look, if it's somebody I've worked with before who wants me to come in, I'd love to do it, but I don't think I'm going to do the whole auditioning thing anymore. So I did a couple more projects and I was writing full time. And that's where preparation meets opportunity, because I had a friend, one of my friends from college, who had moved to LA. I was still in New York at the time. And his name is John Ehrlich. He's a brilliant composer. And he had said, you need to come out to LA and write TV. That's what I really wanted to do. And so I started writing spec episodes of TV shows and original pilots.
So you write this spec episode. How then do you get it in front of someone? Because it's difficult.
That's where my friend John Ehrlich comes in. He knew that I wanted to do that. He was living in LA and he invited me to his wedding. And at his wedding, they were very thoughtful and conscientious. And he sat me next to a guy called Michael Saltzman, who at the time was co-running Murphy Brown on CBS. And Michael and I had gone to school together, and I was friends with his younger brother, David. And Michael and I reconnected. His wife, Jennifer, was there. And the three of us sort of fell madly in love. And we started talking about what we were doing. And, Mike is a comic book guy. And at that point, I was really deep back into the comics. And he asked if he could read my stuff. And so I sent him my stuff. And a year later, he hired me to consult on a show that he was developing at NBC. And then NBC ended up giving him a show called The Naked Truth. And Mike hired me as a staff writer, along with Matthew Weiner, who went on to create Mad Men. We were the two. We were the two baby
Mad
writers
Men,
on the show.
I think one of the best shows has been.
Yeah, that was his second job and my first job in TV. And so that was the turning point. So I moved to Los Angeles from New York because of The Naked Truth, thanks to Mike.
And how did you financially make it?
Mike said, you can live with me until you can afford your own place. But then, paychecks started to come and I was able to get an apartment. So, and I bought a used car to tide me over.
Okay, so you get to LA and then it's starting to come together. Now, you said earlier on that you just knew you wanted to go in this direction.
Yeah.
Manifestation in terms of someone who is just believes fully and totally in their destiny. Are you a believer in that?
I may be proof of it. I mean, the way that I experience it is I love a thing, and the thing I love turns out to be my job. But part of the reason you get hired for that sort of thing is because no one on earth loves it as hard as you do. Do you know?
I heard
That's
Wonder
what
Woman
happened.
was that.
Yeah.
You loved Wonder Woman.
I think that's how I got into comics because, well, that and the 1966 Batman TV series. So Wonder Woman in the 70s was a show that started on ABC and then moved to CBS. And then the Batman show was in syndication and Wonder Woman was in prime time.
I love that Batman show, by the way.
Me
It was
too.
brilliant, wasn't it? I've even seen where the Bat Cave is.
Oh, you've seen it?
Yeah, because from Hollywood, when you go up to the Hollywood sign, you can actually see the road. You can see the road down where he used to drive and then go into his cave.
Yeah, it's
in his
fantastic.
car.
So I loved it and started reading comics because that's where those characters came from. So weirdly, TV was my way into comics, and TV helped me start writing comics a little bit later. So I loved Wonder Woman, I think most, like looking back on it, mostly because if you read those books, because she's a woman, and this is, these comics are all, for the most part, written by men and drawn by men. There are a few female artists, but I don't know that Wonder Woman had a female artist at that point or writer at that point, because we're talking about 1972, 3, 4. But she was allowed to have an emotional life. She was allowed to have a boyfriend. So I think that really appealed to me in terms of being able to identify with her. And she was an outsider. And I grew up not knowing I was gay in Tulsa and Jewish in Tulsa during the 70s. I wasn't like anybody else. Or even the way that I chose to spend time wasn't like other kids. I knew I wasn't like other kids. I really wanted an adult life from a very early age. So even doing things that other kids did was very unsatisfying for me. So I gravitated toward adults for the most part and outsiders like Wonder Woman. I really loved her. I read the book. They started the book over again in 1987. And when it was time for me to write a play, I was writing a play about my relationship with my mom, which was kind of rocky at that point. And I sort of used the Wonder Woman mythology as the scaffolding to write this play. So it was a play about Wonder Woman, someone who's been hired to sort of reimagine Wonder Woman at a time when his relationship with his mom is, she had been Wonder Woman to him for a long time. And now they were having to reassess who they were to each other. I don't know that play ever worked, but it appealed to Manhattan Class Company and they staged it. So I wrote a play about her. I was very lucky. And while I was on Grey's Anatomy, Dan DiDio, who was running DC Comics at the time, asked me if I wanted to write the comic. And I said, no, I can't. And he insisted. And I said, thank you so much. And I did it at a time when Grey's was very demanding. So unfortunately, I was only able to manage, 6 issues that year, which disappointed me.
But it's another facet as well, isn't it? It's another, and because writing in comics is a whole different thing than
it is
writing a screenplay or writing a Broadway play. It's all different.
But I did that, and then I tried to develop Wonder Woman as a TV show for the CW network in 2013. So by the time Zack Snyder was working on developing a Wonder Woman movie that was coming off of his Batman versus Superman movie.
Zack Snyder, big filmmaker.
Incredible director, huge vision. So they were developing a Wonder Woman movie at the same time that he was making Batman versus Superman. And they had been through a number of different scripts and treatments and writers.
It just wasn't working.
How it was expressed to me, I was friends with Jeff Johns at the time, who was chief creative officer at DC Studios. Jeff said, we've kind of hit the wall and Zach wants to talk about the character. And I suggested that you talk to him because nobody understands or loves this character as much as you do. Everybody has their own Wonder Woman. And I think Jeff just got mine and wanted me to share my Wonder Woman with Zach. So that story is, I left Scandal at 6 o'clock one night and drove out to Pasadena.
So Scandal, so how it works with those TV shows, I only found this out from us chatting. There's a whole lot, it's like a writer's room, and there's all writers in a room together. You've got a flip chart and board, and you're just there from like 9 till 6 every day writing.
Every show is different, and this is before the strikes and before COVID. COVID changed everything. Now it's very rare that you're all sitting in a writer's room together.
Right.
Most of it happens on Zoom.
Okay.
But if you're lucky at the time.
That must be terrible on Zoom altogether. That must be really hard to do.
It is hard.
Because when you're together, you have the energy and you're all together.
Yeah.
So, okay. So in those days, it was a writer's room. You were all there together.
Yeah.
So you're doing Shonda Rhimes' Scandal.
Yes.
And then you go after work just to go and have a chat.
So I turned up, and it was a lot more formal than I expected. Zach's team, he had a lot of people there, and the producing team was there. And
how many people
Jeff
were there?
Probably 15, a dozen.
15. Oh, so you think you're going for a little chat with Zack Snyder?
Yeah. And Zach, when I get there, it's a lot of people. It's intimidating. But again, like, I've been hired to come and help. There's no job available. I'm not auditioning. And I have a vested interest in this character. So I go, and Zach starts pitching me the story of Diana's arc in that movie. And he starts pitching me the various treatments. Like, here's the last version of the Wonder Woman movie as we understood it. And I stopped him at a certain point because he was sort of struggling to even get through it because he didn't like it. And it didn't make any sense to him. And I said, can I just stop you? And he goes, yeah. I said, can I just be really, really honest with you? Because I have no value to you unless I'm honest. And he was like, dude, please, that's the only reason that you're here. So I said, it sounds to me like the story that you're describing, the arc for Diana in the Wonder Woman movie you just described, is exactly her arc in Batman versus Superman. And he said, you're right. And I said, can I just tell you the one essential Wonder Woman story as I understand it? And the story after which you've told it, it becomes increasingly difficult to tell stories about her because of this thing. And he goes, yeah. Part of the reason that she's never had a big movie is because it gets bogged down in a lot of mythology. It gets hard to explain the Greek gods, and it's a lot of backstory before her story even begins. I said, Batman's super successful because you get the kid's trauma. His parents are murdered in front of him. He spends the rest of his life seeking justice for them. Superman's story is the immigrant story. He loses his parents and is sent to another world for a better life. And he, in my interpretation, it's constantly trying to be as good as the American Earth people around him. He's striving to be the best version of himself so that he'll be accepted and loved because he's an immigrant. I said, the Wonder Woman thing, the closest example I can give you, I said, do you have kids? And he said, yes, he's got a lot of kids. I said, have you seen The Little Mermaid? Disney's The Little Mermaid. And he said, yes. And I said, okay. So Diana is Ariel, and Hippolyta, his mom, is King Triton, and Steve Trevor is Prince Eric. Ariel wants to be, she loves her dad. She loves this world. She knows there's another world out there that she's got all kinds of fantasies about that she wants to go explore, which are embodied by Prince Eric. Her dad knows if she leaves the water, they will kill her. She will die, and is desperate to save her. I said, that's the triangle at the heart of the movie is mom doesn't want her to leave because she knows she'll be a target once she steps out into man's world. And she leaves because of her curiosity and because she's attracted to Steve Trevor and because to her, he embodies, like, he's a man and he's honorable and he's funny and he's sexy. So why are we assuming everybody else isn't? She's very trusting and she knows she can handle herself. So she decides to leave home. And sure enough, her mom was right. And the world is a very dangerous place and people start trying to kill her. She basically has to force the change in the people she encounters and inspire the change in the people that she encounters. And she's the embodiment of that kind of service and love and generosity. And at the same time, she's growing up and having her projections and illusions shattered. I say all of this. And Zach is like, and his team was trying to protect the work that they had already done. When his people start defending the choices they've already made, I throw my hands up and I go, you guys do what you want to do.
So that meeting finishes.
We're walking out.
Yeah, you apologize to Jeff because you got into some of the emotional stuff.
Yeah, I was like, you told me not to do it and I did it and I'm sorry. Yeah. And he was like, no, it's fine. And Zach follows us out and stops us and he says, what are you doing tomorrow? And I said, I'm at Scandal full time. He was like, well, what time do you think you could be here? And I was like, for what? And he's like, oh, dude, we're gonna write your movie. And I said, what? He goes, yeah. The next 3 nights were Zach and Jeff and me in that conference room by ourselves with a whiteboard breaking the new version of the movie.
Trying to work the arc of the story.
Yeah, in 3 nights. And we did it. And on Monday, the studio said yes. So then it became, will you write the script? And I said no many times. I can't.
Because you're busy you've got a contract in Scandal.
Which I love. And I'm in no hurry to leave that job. So Zach threatens to call Shonda to ask permission for me to go write Wonder Woman.
So he's like, right, you're coming on this show. I'm going to call Shonda Rhimes and get you out of Scandal.
And I was like, please don't do that.
No.
I said, I'll talk to Shonda. So I go downstairs to see Abby, one of her assistants. And I say to Shonda, have any time this morning? And Shonda shows up in my office like moments later, and says, are you quitting? And I was like, no, I'm not quitting. This weird thing happened and I need to talk to you about it. And I'm prepared to say no. I have said no for you.
But this is a strange thing because obviously Wonder Woman's your love of your life of these characters. You're being offered to do this
the movie
and now you're saying no.
Yeah. Because I have a job. It's a job I love. And movies,
but I mean, you could,
hard.
But why didn't you think of going to Shonda and saying, hey, please, can you let me do this?
Never in a million years.
You just didn't want to because of that, because of your honor?
But also you don't want to ask people for things. I don't.
Right.
I mean, part of the lesson in this business for me is, it's much better when you can offer people things rather than ask for things. People who are as successful and as busy as Shonda is, and maybe all people, they don't want to have to deal with other people's needs.
No, of course.
I don't want to do that. I don't want to ask her for anything. I want to stay off her phone sheet. I want to do my job. I want to be of service. That's all I want. But she shows up, I tell her the story, and she says, well, you have to do it. It's Wonder Woman. You have to do it. And I said, well, how would that even work? My agent said no other showrunner he's ever come across in his many years could ever have said this. But she said, do the group writes, give me 3 afternoons a week in the writer's room, and the rest of the time you can write Wonder Woman, and we won't even tell the studio about it. So, which, I'm sorry, studio, if you're listening. So that was a huge gift that she gave me. And then I wrote that script. Well, once I told Zach I would write the script, I was then informed by the studio that because I'd never written a movie before professionally, they were going to do what they deemed a bake-off. So,
what was the bake-off?
Well, they had just hired 3 writers, all women, to write treatments for the movie before I was brought in. So they had contracts with those women, and then they had another writer under contract still who'd done a draft of the previous version. So I was going to write the outline of the new version of the movie, and then all 5 of us were each going to write 5 different versions of my outline. And we would compete. Like every 30 days, you'd write another 30 pages. they would give notes on those pages and eliminate people that they didn't want in the process anymore. So it was like,
Wow, that's like
it was
it's
terrible.
a knockout.
It was
Yeah, I mean, it's
it was
like
terrible. So everybody's writing their own version of the story, and we're competing against each other. And it's psychologically very difficult because not only are you, for me, not only are you trying to write your best version of the story, but you're thinking about what other people are doing as well. And you could be fired at any moment, and it's hard to stay invested, and it's challenging for me. I think professional screenwriters who do this all the time, you might not find it challenging. It's the director's movie and it's her prerogative.
Yeah.
She wanted to get a woman's perspective on the movie and hire the person she wanted to hire. I was let go at that same time.
How does that feel?
I was devastated.
Because you were devastated.
Yeah, and I should have seen it coming. And
What's the emotional impact to that? Like, how long does that last?
It's a rejection and it's terrible, but mine lasted about 40 minutes because as I left the brunch at which I was fired, Shonda Rhimes called me and said, "When are you coming home? I need you."
Oh, had she had the call that this was happening?
No. And I said, "Funnily enough, I just got fired, so I'm coming back tomorrow. Why?" And she said, "Oh, I'm executive producing this show that we sold internationally called The Catch on ABC. And we're about to let the creative team go because of creative differences. We can't make it work." There had been 5 scripts. It wasn't gelling and the network wasn't happy. And so they needed to make a change. And the showrunners who were on the show couldn't. Here was the challenge. The premise needs to stay the same of the show. You know, we've sold the show internationally. So it's about a woman who's about to get married who finds out that her husband-to-be has just stolen her entire life savings and betrayed her. And what does she do in response? So that you have to keep. You have to keep the actors who we've already hired. You have to keep the sets. You have to keep the costumes. Everything else can change. You don't have the characters can change. It can be whatever you want to be. And I watched and I listened and I said, I don't know what I would do. And she said, "Well, you've got an 11-hour flight before you have to tell me. So why don't you take 11 hours and figure it out?" So I got on the plane. I'd just gotten fired, got on the plane that night, got my legal pad out, started. And by the time I landed, I was in baggage claim and Shonda called and said, "Okay, what have you got?" And I was like, "Okay, hold on to your hats. Here's what I think it needs to be." She said, "Great. Are you prepared to pitch it to her producing partner, Betsy Beers?" I'm driven to lunch with Betsy, pitch it to Betsy. Betsy says, "Do you think you could pitch this tomorrow to the studio and the network combined at ABC?"
Me. I mean, that's a great way to come off a sacking, isn't
What
it?
a
Because you just forget about it straight away. You're just looking forward.
What a blessing. And we already had air dates. We were already behind. I had to start from scratch with the script. They had a team of writers that had already been working on this show for months. We only got to do 2 seasons. There was a 3rd season I really wanted to do just to sort of wrap things up. But it's sexy and it's fun and it's romantic. It's a screwball romantic comedy caper. I love it. If you ever get a chance to watch it, it's fun.
Tell me your superpower. So everyone's got a superpower. You love these superheroes. What is your superpower in relation to your career, your life?
I think, what's interesting is that, and this is true about some of the characters I've written as well, I think all the things that one feels self-conscious about in one's youth, right? The things that set you apart from other people that make you feel, different or like an outcast or whatever, those turn out to be the things that end up saving you as an adult and they become your superpower. So that's one way of answering it is, I believe that you and I have talked about this a little bit, but that neurodiversity is it's not a myth, but I don't believe that there's a linear
No, you
spectrum.
don't. Yeah, it's not like just a line.
Right. There's no real neurotypical or, I think we're all on this 360 grid. I've always been extremely sensitive, whatever that means. And a lot of times when you're a kid, they try to cajole you out of it. They make you self-conscious about your sensitivity. You feel things deeply. You express things. So maybe my sensitivity is my superpower to some degree.
Yeah, because that's within your writing, all your writing skills.
All your listening, everything you know about other people and the way. And my interest in watching other people interact and why people do the things they do, that's all sensitivity.
Isn't that amazing though? As you say, is at school, that's what was
They try to knock it out of you.
like a weakness for you, or made you feel apart from.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that has propelled you into this higher stratosphere of Hollywood.
I feel bad for most men because women, again, like Wonder Woman, she's allowed to have an emotional life. Women are allowed to have emotional lives in our culture. They're not made to feel ashamed for that, but men are actually made to feel ashamed for having emotional lives.
There's a theory that women live 3, 4, 5 years longer, whatever that is.
Yeah.
It's because they are able to express their emotions and cry and talk.
Well, there's less repression.
Yeah.
I mean, there are all kinds of forms of societal repression that we inflict on women, but what we have decided as a culture that is feminine behavior. And so when a man experiences or expresses any form of that kind of socialization, he's not being traditionally masculine in that way and is made to feel ashamed of it.
I think it's New Zealand where male suicide is very high. And it's like, I'm okay. It's some expression they have, and it's related to I'm okay. They're also macho, and they're also, I'm okay. And then
none of us is okay. And we're all wrestling with stuff, all of us. So, but you can't in traditional masculinity, it reads as weakness. To some. Imagine if we all felt strong enough in ourselves to be vulnerable, if we were that secure in who we are.
Well, I love it that your superpower is that part of you that maybe felt less than at school.
It has come in handy. I mean, for me, the things that I have loved since I was very young, I have been able to do professionally. So I think loving something is the key. I think I loved Wonder Woman for decades. And the fact that I loved Wonder Woman and was semi-public about it led to my being able to write this version of that character.
Did you see yourself? Would you like to have been Wonder Woman?
Well, I wanted everyone who saw that movie, boy, man, women, girls, everybody, I wanted them to leave that theater wanting to be more like her.
Yeah.
Gender aside. They're not watching a story about a woman. They're watching a story about a person. Yeah.
One of the things I only found out today is that you were the co-creator of Young Avengers. And I love it that you created a gay couple who were 50. Are they meant to be 15 years old?
Yeah, they're about 15. I don't think they're driving yet. I was very lucky and was working on a show called The OC. And I was brought into the process after Josh had written several versions of the pilot, and we were commissioned to write a series Bible. So very early on. And in the process, the character of Seth Cohen, who is played by Adam Brody in the series, sort of evolved. And he became more and more like us. And I remember at one point Stephanie saying, what if we gave him Josh's pop music obsession and we gave him Alan's comic book obsession? At that point, I had been on Sex and the City for 2 seasons. And Michael Patrick King, who had run those seasons of that show, really impressed upon us to write from not just our experience, but our questions about ourselves in the universe, and to make Sex and the City, the stories we were telling there, as personal as possible, because in doing so, you would make them more universal. And he would say, I want you to write about whatever has the most heat in your life. So making Seth, we couldn't figure out who this character was. And the solution was, let's make him more like us. And so, because we know how to write that, Seth became one of the first characters on TV. This was before Big Bang Theory, so he was very much one of the first comic nerds on TV. And we were allowed to name check our favorite creators and put DC Comics on the screen because we were a Warner Brothers show. And it was very satisfying for me to write that stuff. And Josh was very generous and let me. At some point, Wizard Magazine, which was the comic book Bible, monthly comic book Bible, they wanted to do an interview, and Josh said, you need to interview Allan, very generously. That interview got to the people at Marvel Comics, who then said to me, I made a trip to New York, and they said, we're about to relaunch the Avengers book with Brian Michael Bendis, who was my favorite writer at the time, writing it. And we would like you to write a comic called Young Avengers because of the OC and the popularity of the OC. So I had to come up with new characters and ways to sort of spin these characters. And again, listening to Michael Patrick King in my head, it was right about what is going on with you. And so I was going through relationship stuff at the time, and putting a gay character, or in this case, a gay couple, in the mix of these like 5 kids, 6 kids, felt like very organic, right? Because I'm writing about myself in some ways. I'm writing about what I'm going through. But I also expected Marvel to push back quite a bit because it's not mainstream comics stuff, especially in 2004, 2005. So there was a version of it where the Hulkling character was presented as a female, discovers she's a shapeshifter, and that, you know, she's going to find out that she's biologically male, that that's not her real form. She's going to have a romance with a biological male, but then when that form changes and they're both boys, what do? Do they love each other, or is it gendered? Blah. It was a lot. And my editor, Tom Brevoort, who I adore at Marvel, said, can't we just make the 2 of them gay? It's so complicated. And I was like, would you let me? And he was like, yeah, what? Who cares? So who knows if it was like, who cares? Nobody's going to read this book or whatever. But he just said, who cares? And the who cares was the best part of it, because then their sexuality became beside the point.
Yeah.
This was fairly late. I think Jim Chung, who co-created the Young Avengers with me, the artist who created the looks of the characters. If you look at Young Avengers #1 and you look at Hulkling, the way Jim has drawn him, he was still a she at that time. So it's a little bit, that's how late in the game it was before, let's just make them both boys and make them gay and it's no big deal. So I can't thank Tom enough for that moment. Amazing. And for C.B. Cebulski and for Joe Quesada, who was editor-in-chief at the time, for letting that be. And we got hate mail, like not a lot, but I was answering all the letters personally, and we were printing the letters in the comics because we did that back in the day. And there were people who were really offended that a homosexual relationship was being, and then I had just as many letters saying like, it's clear that they're boyfriends. Why don't you just let them kiss? But I didn't want to foreground their sexuality. I just wanted it to be a background.
They're just hanging out. Yeah. They're just hanging out together.
So it took several years before we even put an on-screen kiss in the book.
Yeah.
So Young Avengers was the first time where I really just got to use my voice in a really long time. And it was the most satisfying creative experience I'd ever had. It really was phenomenal.
Congratulations on making that happen. It's big. That's big.
I mean, it was really, truly a labor of love for everybody involved.
And it's a moment for a lot of people. So successful people, you know, the reality is life being life. Everyone has their ups and downs. What's a big moment for you where you've had a big situation that's been very difficult for you to deal with, having to churn work out, and creatively, kind of mind has to be pretty steady, I would imagine, maybe I'm wrong, to be able to stay in that creative space. So
I was in a 10-year relationship with someone I thought I was going to be with forever. I was very happy in that relationship. While I was on Sex and the City, I was on for seasons 3 and 4. And toward the end of season 4, I was in New York working on the show. He was living in San Francisco, but we would try as often as we could for him to fly out since I couldn't leave. And he loved New York. And we had lived there together for quite some time before the move to California. I discovered that I want to be respectful but the relationship wasn't what I thought it was. And the rules I was playing by were not being observed by all parties. And the reality that I thought was my life was a story that I had told myself over those 10 years. And they were 10 great years, but when you discover that it's just a story and it's not real, it is honestly, it just challenges it for me. I won't generalize, but like I had to learn how to walk again on solid ground. Like every step you take, you don't trust. I didn't trust my judgment. I didn't trust anything. It really felt like having to start from scratch. So I ended up.
And you were working on Sex and the City at the same time?
I was doing what turned out to be my last episode of season 4. And I truly felt like I will never write anything funny or romantic ever again as a result. So I told Sarah Jessica Parker and Michael Patrick King, obviously we were all in each other's lives and in each other's business, so everybody knew everything. But I told them what happened, and I was like, I don't know if I can come back for another season. I literally felt as though I had been in a terrible car accident and was I left the show. They were very gracious and let me out of the next year of my contract. And I moved back to LA, and I guess I got into therapy is what happened. While I was on Sex and the City, I had become friendly with Amy Sherman Palladino, who created Gilmore Girls, which was season 1 was like my favorite show at the time. And she was a Sex and the City fan. She knew what happened to me and said, look, why don't you come on to season 2 and just consult and just get out of your head? And, she was very generous, and that really helped me ease my way back into work and just being around other people. And then going on to the OC, I met the therapist of my dreams, and he really helped me examine how I got into that relationship in the beginning and how I sort of blinded myself to the truth of what our situation was.
Was there any clues when you look back?
There was a point at which I was living and working in Los Angeles, and he was living and working in San Francisco because of our jobs. And long distance relationships, as you know, are very difficult, if not impossible, depending on the terms. And there was a moment while I was working on The Naked Truth where he asked to open up the relationship. And that is not something I had ever wanted. And so I said, if that's what you want to do, I think we should end it so you can be free to do the things you want to do. But because I don't think I'm going to be able to do it. Like, that's just not where I am. So we did break up. And then 24 hours later, he called and said, he'd gone to San Francisco and called me back and said, let's not break up. Let's find a way through this. Let's go to couples counseling. Let's figure this out. And we tried. But I think if I look back,
that was the point.
So I think that was the biggest looking back clue. And when something like that happens and the person you thought you were with isn't that person, or the way you know them isn't them or all of them, it casts doubt on your time together, all 10 years of it. So I started pulling the thread of that, and it just unraveled those whole 10 years. I will say this, I think especially growing up gay, especially during the AIDS crisis, there's a lot of self-hatred and shame around being gay and around sex. And I think I was young. I was 23 when we got together. I think I was very keen to be in a relationship that was safe. And I think he would probably describe what we had or what I wanted as a heteronormative version of a gay relationship that looks and sounds and feels like what you're supposed to want as a heterosexual person. We were very traditionally coupled. I think he'd been fairly clear in the beginning, and I just hadn't. He wanted something not that, and I think he stayed with me because he wanted to be with me, but it wasn't what he wanted, and I wasn't smart enough to know we should probably pursue different things because we want different things from the get-go. But also, like, I needed to attend to my own self-hatred and my own, like, internalized homophobia and fear of being single or being sexual or whatever those issues were. I had a lot to work through. I just don't think people in their 20s, I'll speak for myself because there are lots of people in their 20s who are wise and in ways that I'm not. But I thought I knew a lot, and I thought I knew a lot about myself, and I did not. I was not fully cooked yet. And I didn't protect myself in many ways.
You sound a little bit like you're beating yourself up for that. It's not your fault.
No, and he was trying to make his way in the world too. And I think I don't know that any of it was intentional. I think I can't speak for him, but I have a lot of compassion. I know that it was very hard for him that entire period, and obviously he had another partner in another city and a whole other life. And there was a story he told that person about our breakup. And anyway, it was very hard, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. That's the point, is that it forced me to really get to know myself and my limitations and my, it forced me to work through a lot of stuff that I don't know that I would have if we'd stayed together.
A worse scenario has brought out the best scenario.
Absolutely. Well, how can I learn from it is the biggest takeaway.
And be more. As you say, you've ended up more. You know yourself. You feel you know who you are. You know what you're about.
Right.
You know what you want.
But the key is always to be learning, right? That's why we're here, I think, is to be of service to each other and to be loving with each other, but also to learn. And if I think I had boxed myself into a relationship where I was feeling safe and happy, but I don't know how much I was learning, because anything that challenged it, do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know that we would have chosen each other outside of that moment in time. We were not right for each other. But I'm grateful. It was a great 10 years. I really loved him a lot, and I loved our life together. And I think I have a greater understanding of what it really means to love someone and what it really means to love oneself. And I think everything about my work is better as a result. I don't know.
Yeah.
It was
to understand heartbreak.
I also think stories are the most powerful thing in the world. And I had a vision of what I wanted my life to look like, and I was telling myself that story. And obviously that story wasn't true.
Has it made you mistrustful in relationships?
Not mistrustful. I know that I'm not going to allow myself to invest in my projection of who I think you are, right? Like, that's where you get into trouble, is like, I have to be careful that my idea of Shay is separate from who Shay actually is. So I go into every new relationship, whether it's romantic or not, aware of the difference between who Shay actually is and my ideas about Shay. The big lesson for me in therapy was about developing healthy boundaries. I think a younger me really thought the ideal state was to merge with the person you love and you're connecting with, and really share and merge. And it's not that. In my experience and in my therapy life, it's about having really solid boundaries and then sharing, which makes it even more.
But if you merge, it's like 1 and 1 equals 1.5. Whereas if you say separate, 1 and 1 equals 3, isn't it? It's not being codependent. It's a codependent relationship, isn't it? When you merge.
Yeah. A young person's idea of what that's meant to be. And that comes from too many pop songs. That's simply what that is.
So, aside of your success, who are you?
I used to be very invested in the idea of identity. There was a class, it couldn't have been in college, it was probably a high school class, where you would read first novels of great writers, and it was called Search for Identity. And they were always these sort of coming of age novels or coming out novels if you're reading a gay novel. And I was always very invested in that story, that sort of, and when I came out of the closet, like with anything, I became very interested in homosexuality and its history and the codifications and the gay rights movement and the ACT UP movement. And I used to really be invested in that and in the sense of self. And the older I get and the more I hope I learn, I find the idea of one's identity to be counterproductive. This is who I am doesn't feel true to what the process is, which is I'm constantly in flux and in progress and changing, and so are you. And I give you the grace to be whoever you want to be, and I want to grant myself the same grace. So the identity thing, I find, is a confining way of looking at things. We love binaries in this culture. We love, are you gay or straight? Are you Republican or Democrat? Are you left-handed or right-handed? Whatever it is. And the truth is, I don't know a single person who is binary, who obeys the law, the arbitrary laws. We're all on an emotional spectrum. We're on physical spectrums. There's a spectrum of neurodiversity that we're all on at some point. So we're constantly in motion and in process and changing. So who are you, I think, is a reductive way of thinking about it. Even the phrase, the best life. On social media, living my best life is an aspirational. It usually means I'm on a yacht or taking my own photo in an infinity pool.
Yeah.
But the way I think about living one's best life is you've defined it that way. Yeah. Are you doing what you love? I'm in the very fortunate position of I make my living doing the thing that I love doing.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't or can't, right?
No.
So they have to work at Bankers Trust
in
order to do the thing they love. But I think your point or the goal of this is to inspire people, no matter how they're able to make their living, to prioritize when they're not doing that, or ideally when they are doing it, but to figure out what it is you love and make that your focus, even if it's not your source of income.
Yeah, and have a goal toward it. Sometimes the notion that maybe one day
you have
I
to
could
be
get
doing
there.
it.
You do have to be doing it.
Shonda used to have a real issue, and I think she's right about. She said it more eloquently, but it's like, don't dream it, do it. It has to become your obsession.
Yeah.
So I think whatever it is that you find yourself being obsessed with or by, that's where you throw yourself fully. I guess I worry about, this is my big worry about humanity, and I'm going to sound not profound and I'm going to sound old, is social media.
You're out in the street now, and it's like that movie, Her. Yeah. Everyone's just walking around.
But it sucks the love out of you. It really does. And it's just feeding people who already are richer than you can even imagine. So the only way we're going to save each other and the planet is to just put it down and disconnect from it.
But it's difficult. It's difficult because it's embedded. It's becoming embedded and more embedded and more embedded.
We can just put it down and limit our time away from it and know that it's toxic. Yeah. And you can be on for work purposes, but there's no room to be yourself or to figure yourself out if you're constantly being fed other people's stuff. You're drowning in it. Yeah. So I fear that it's hard for people to drown out the stuff they're taking in long enough to discover what their passions are and what their interests are and who they are.
So I'm trying to, in my life, remove my phone, but I find it really challenging with work.
I have a workaround. When I get stuck work-wise, I have a trick. I go to a cafe or to a restaurant. If I'm going to have dinner with somebody at 7, I'll arrive at 6 and sit at the bar, put the phone away, take the notebook out. You can order a latte or a martini, strand yourself there with a notebook and a pen, or just the people around you, and you're present, you're in the zone. You've got nothing to do but focus on your own, whatever's going on. I know that being alive is scary. I experience that myself. And now, because of geopolitics, it's even scarier. I mean, at least in my experience, I'm sure World War II was even scarier. But it's a scary time, and people want to be distracted from their own thoughts, and they don't want to be up here. But I do believe that as a species, it is essential that we put it down and read a book or open your notebook or meditate or have a martini or talk to the person next to you and say hi. It's crucial because we do have a choice. It's not mandatory that we all do this. This is hypnosis. It's mass hypnosis.
It's terrible. If I'm out there and I want to do my thing that I love, what tips or hints have you got?
I only know the way I did it, and let yourself become obsessed with it. If you love it, try to figure out how it's made and what creative decisions go into it, and whatever it is, if it's science, if it's architecture, whatever it is, allow yourself to become fully obsessed by it and a student of it and the people who make it, Let it take over your consciousness. Let it really steep yourself in it. That's how I do it to this day. If I get a new project and it really interests me, I read and read and read and read and go on the internet and, study up as much as I can and try to figure out why I love it and why it has the effect on me that it does. Why do certain movies make me feel more human or the best version of myself? I have movies that no matter how many times I watch them, I feel grateful to be alive and I feel grateful to be an artist and a writer. And why? Like, what is it about those movies that do that for me? And that's the kind of stuff I want to make and be a part of.
Is there one or two you can share with me?
Yeah, I mean, I am a romantic comedy person, so the Philadelphia Story is the apotheosis of everything that I'm talking about. And I know that movie has its critics, but Tom Rothman at Sony recently described it in his Criterion Closet video as perfect, and I agree with him. It is the best version, the most perfect version of itself, and an improvement on the play on which it's based. His Girl Friday is another. The Red Shoes, Powell and Pressburger is another. Colonel Blimp of Powell and Pressburgers is another. Like, they were inventing it, obviously, in the silent era and in the early talkies era. But I marvel at the accomplishments of Lubitsch and Max Ophuls and Billy Wilder. And it just doesn't get any better than that. Hitchcock, especially early British Hitchcock. So when I have time off, that's where I end up spending it, is trying to learn from the masters, because it's so good and so thoroughly entertaining and so well crafted. And I have a tendency to romanticize that era as well. I'm sure if I'd been caught up in the studio system at that time, where there are dozens of uncredited writers on the movies that I love, and I'm sure it was exactly the same madhouse. But and there are lots of mediocre movies and bad movies as well. But the movies I gravitate toward they were made during that time.
Well, thank you, Allan. Really appreciate your time. You gave me lots of prior time to this, and it was very generous because you're a busy, busy person and you love what you're doing. And it's been really fun for me. I've learned a lot about what I'm doing here and you.
Oh,
you're a really amazing person, and I'm honored to have you here.
Thank you. It's an honor to have been asked, and it was a pleasure to talk to you, as always.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
You always hear this on every podcast, but it really will help to get the best guests. Can you like and subscribe? Or if you love today's guest, please share it with someone who you feel it might resonate with. You've been listening to Best Life Podcast. Until next time, take care, keep exploring and living your best life.